Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, a workforce development consultant with the Kent ISD. And I'm really glad to have Jason Khoury with us today. He has a history in the military that we're going to talk about today, and his title is a multi-purpose channel transmission system operator. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, thank you, Krista. I actually just noticed there was a typo on the screen there. It's a multi-transmission systems operator.
Oh, I had it flipped around. Okay, we'll have to fix that. Thank you.
It's okay though.
Yes. Well, one thing we like to do here at the Career Chats, Jason, is really take our mentors back to high school. When you were 15 or 16, did you think you'd grow up to be in the military and helping with some of those intelligence systems behind the scenes? Tell us about that early thinking.
Yeah, no, the military is probably the furthest thing I thought I would be when I was in high school. I actually wanted to be like a professional skateboarder. So that was like my passion at the time. I enjoyed extreme sports. I spent most of my time either skateboarding, snowboarding, being outdoors, and just having a good time. After high school, I decided to just go to GRCC and do that for a little bit. So I actually didn't end up in the military until I was about 21 years old. And it was just kind of a spur of the moment thing. My sister, she was in the Navy. She joined out of high school, and she spent about 8 years in the Navy, where she became an officer and was doing really good things with her life. And that just kind of inspired me to jump on board. Just because growing up, I didn't have really a structure. I just kind of did what I wanted, went where I wanted, just kind of was a kid, right? And then I needed to get something to settle me down. So the military kind of got me where I needed to be.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And there's definitely some things I want to dig into that with my curious hat. I'm looking back in high school though, were you pretty athletic and liked to be moving? It sounds like that was just part of how Jason rolled at that age.
Yeah, I could not sit in a seat. Yeah, school was not my forte, right? I just barely squeaked by in high school. So um,
Yeah. And that's reality. And I think for any student on this call or one of our school counselors, as we look at who we are and find a job that fits, it's important to understand that's the way we're wired and we should find jobs that fit. So your sister was kind of a role model. She was in the Navy, achieving good things. And did she kind of encourage you then as she saw you maybe not having a plan to consider it? And were you worried that it would be too structured for someone who doesn't like to sit still per se?
um, so and she didn't really encourage me to go. Just like through the conversations that we've had over the years, it was just something that I kind of decided to pursue on my own path. In terms of being worried about being able to handle it, to be honest, that was always in the back of my head, and there was plenty of times, like especially through that initial basic training phase, where I really did want to quit, but ultimately, it's something that I signed up for, and it was pushing me to be the best person that I could have been. So I just kind of was able to stick with it there. But
And I don't have a military family, so I have lots of questions for you. How did you even decide which branch? And which branch did you end up in? And then why did you choose that one?
yeah, so like I said, I joined when I was 21. Originally, I did want to pursue a career in the Navy. And however, so I was actually going to school at Aquinas at this time, and when I decided I was taking a break between my sophomore and junior year there, and I decided like, hey, I want to join the military to get away from college. So I was like, I'm gonna go active duty in the Navy. So after, speaking with a Navy recruiter, the job I was gonna do there was a nuclear tech, where I'd have to go to MIT, which is a super hard school for 2 years before I could even start doing my job. And I was like, well, that's not fun. If I'm going to go to college, I might as well just stay home. So then that's where I pursued a career with the National Guard, but it's kind of a part-time gig where you get to go do 1 weekend a month on your military duties, and then the rest of the time you're just a civilian.
Yeah, and I think I was fortunate to go to an educator summit on the National Guard, and I learned so much. And I do want to spend some time really educating our viewers about the benefits of the military. But let's start with that. So you chose the National Guard.
Mhm.
And like you say, it's 1 month a weekend. So give us kind of like the big picture of what the National Guard is, and then maybe we can compare and contrast to what you even know about some of the other branches to give some
Yeah,
thoughts
yeah. So the National Guard is what it is. It's basically just the Army, but instead of it being funded by the federal government, it's funded by the state government. There are a lot of roles similar to the big army is what we would call that you would get in the National Guard. But ultimately, it's just essentially the majority of the standard National Guard soldier, which we would call them M-Day. They're only required to go to drill 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks in the summer. So for someone that was in college, pursuing that degree, it really worked out well for me just because I was able to, I only had to leave for 1 weekend and then the 2 weeks in the summertime, which really didn't conflict with my schedule at all. But at the same time, while you're in the National Guard, even though you're not there full time, you're still being held to the standard of a full time soldier. So you're still required to train and practice and do everything that a normal soldier would do, but you just don't have to be on a military base to do that. I actually, after I graduated college, had the opportunity to go full time afterwards within the Guard, where we could talk about that a little bit later down the road.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. So again, all the same standards, training and practicing. I would like to focus in on what are some of those requirements, and is there things that you've heard that is keeping young people from really being able to get into the military? Like, I hear there's kind of a shortage, but some of those requirements kids don't seem to be passing. Do you know anything about that, or want to share what it does take to get in?
So, really, it depends on what you want to do in the military. So there's a lot of different jobs that range from basic infantrymen up to, some of the more technical skills, which is like IT, or even, you get some of the more like helicopter pilots and all these really cool jobs throughout there. And what you do when you first enter in, you take a test called the ASVAB, which is just a basic understanding of what you know, whether it be math, reading, all those basic skills that you're learning in high school. They give you a score on those, and what you get is your line score, and that determines what jobs you qualify for.
And there's recruiters that do visit local high schools, and some of the school counselors may be aware of that, obviously.
But
Go ahead.
That essentially that score is going to determine whether or not you're going to want to go in the military, basically, because a lot of people have a certain job in mind. If they don't qualify for that, that's going to cross them off. But in terms of like physical requirements, I always say it doesn't really matter what condition you enter the military. You're young; they're going to put you in the shape that you need to be in. Just ultimately make sure that you're doing a career that you really enjoy, because that's going to play a huge role down the line.
Yeah, I have met young people who maybe weren't in the best shape, and the recruiter does get them into shape as when the time comes, they're ready to go. So you took the ASVAB, and the kind of jobs that they started recommending to you, were those things of interest? And did it give you some careers that maybe you hadn't thought about?
Yeah, so like I said, originally it was the nuclear technician program, but then when I went to the National Guard, they wanted me to go do intelligence, which is a more advanced type of career. And then there was also this other job, which is the multi-system transmission systems operator. Mouthful, sorry, started there a little bit, but essentially I would be working directly with the intelligence guys, getting paid the same. I get the same bonus, just way less work and way less responsibility. So I figured that was a good fit for me.
Yeah, so you found something you liked.
Mm-hmm.
So you're a young person. I know that young people might be wondering, like, I do want to spend just a minute because this is my curiosity too. What was basic training like, and how did it compare to what your expectations were?
So my expectations were from the movies, right? That's all I had going into it. And it was about 10 times harder than I thought it was going to be, right? Not the physical side of things, but really just the mental side of things, right? This was the first time that I've ever really been away from my family for 9 months, and I didn't have a cell phone to communicate with them, and it was just me, and I was with a bunch of strangers from all over the country with different backgrounds, and we were all being forced to do things we didn't want to do. But in terms of camaraderie and just building a team, and it really paid out in the end. So at first it was really tough, and then as things went on, and you got to see that finish line, it kind of was easier to push through. But there's a lot of physical activity and not much sleep going on.
Yeah, I think what I've just even heard you share so far, Jason, is that it did get really tough. And yes, you missed your family, but you had made this commitment in your own mind and you persevered. That must be very rewarding to know when you get to that graduation point that you persevered through that. Is that true?
Correct. Yeah. And it really all stems down to the reason why I joined. So being first generation in America, I always felt it was my duty to join and serve this country so I can, contribute as the people before me did. So that kind of where that passion stemmed from, but also I really did enjoy serving a purpose greater than my own. So having that always in the back of my head kind of provided me that motivation, that extra push that I always needed to get through the days.
Yeah, I love that. I think a lot of young people, we don't talk about values very often, and that being that driven by that value is what got you through some of those really difficult things. I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
Mhm.
So you graduate, you survive all that, and then like what were those next steps? So you did weekends for how long, and then when? Tell us about that transition to full time.
Yeah, so I did weekends up until I think it was about 2018. So I enlisted 2016, did weekends for about 2018, and then I kind of started doing like partial orders. So this is where I would do I'd spend like 2 weeks at the armory doing various tasks there, and then 2 weeks at my normal job where I was working at AT&T as a retail sales consultant there. And then eventually, as COVID happened, more and more orders came just because there was a lot more opportunities to grow and there's a lot of things going on in the world at the time. So I was able to go on full time afterwards from there. And that's where I was part of a mission called Cree, C2CRE, where essentially we were the chemical response element over here on this side of the Mississippi, where we would essentially assist a lot of the different government agencies with being able to provide them communication systems in a short term.
That sounds very technical. Tell us about the training, like, because a lot of young people probably like, how would I even know how to do that? So tell us how they prepare you for something like that.
Yeah, so it actually goes from after you graduate your basic training. So you'll go to what they call advanced individual training. So every single person who goes to basic training, that's just general training on how to become a soldier. And then from there, you stem off into all the different specialized schools where you'll learn your specific career. So I had the pleasure of going down to Augusta, Georgia, in Fort Gordon, and that's where they call them the Cyber Center of Excellence over there, where everybody cyber, everything technical, computer wise, they all get their training down there where I spent, I believe it was 17 or 15 to 17 weeks. I can't remember exactly how long I spent there. Just learning exactly how to do my job. So that's where we got to play with every single piece of equipment I'll ever see and get to know every little detail about that. So when I did get to my unit, I was 100% confident in my abilities to perform what I needed to do.
Oh, I love that as a citizen of the United States to hear that you're so thoroughly trained,
Oh yeah.
and that you're leaving 100% confident. That's wonderful. Um, would you be able to share with us what kind of a typical day was then for you in this type of role once you completed that 15 or 17 weeks of training?
Yeah, so it's difficult to lay out a typical day because there was never such thing as a typical day. But the basic summarize what we would do essentially on the military side of things is think about your home internet provider, and that's what we would do for the military. So essentially, we were a support soldier, so we would support the other soldiers, so the infantry, a lot of the combat arms. In this case, we were the military police units here in Michigan. And they need to be able to use internet, make calls, and do all that fun stuff. So we would usually just go ahead and set up our equipment and provide them with those services so they're able to operate freely.
So truly a critical part of the whole system of protecting our country.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did you do that job?
I spent my whole career doing it. So
Yeah,
about 6 years active.
6 years active. And
Mhm.
as part of that job, did you travel around the world then, or were you based in the United States?
So I never got the pleasure to travel around the world. A lot of my other friends did. I got to go to different states to perform different missions throughout. We went to Buffalo, New York a couple times. Go down to Georgia, And then I know my unit went down to Washington, D.C., got to spend some time in Texas, and then but I spent the majority of my time in West Michigan.
Yeah.
And when we
And
did travel, it wasn't over a month at a time.
okay.
So
Yeah. How does one know how long to stay? So you did for 6 years. You were started weekends, like the part-time, and then you went full-time. How do you know then when it's time, like, oh, I'm going to move out back into civilian life? What were your thought processes?
So one huge benefit about being in the military is that you get a huge support structure on whatever you want to do, whether it be stay in the military, whether it be pursue an advanced individual degree, or just meet employers that are really passionate about hiring veterans. So it really, for me, it was just my time was up essentially, right? My contract was over. COVID was right in the midst of things. I was able to obtain a good civilian job, so my time was just, it's like I got what I wanted out of the military, and then I got my college degree paid for. I was able to use those connections to get a job, and then
Yeah,
back
and
to
that's what I
civilian
wanted to
world.
even focus on, some of those perks of being in the military and how it helps you transition to the next thing. So let's just quickly highlight what some of those perks were for you. You obviously got, is it called the GI Bill to be able to
Yeah.
pay? Yep. What else
Yep.
would you like people to know, kids who are thinking about this as a career?
So yeah, as you mentioned, you get the GI Bill. So since I was National Guard, I didn't get the full GI Bill, but what essentially what they gave me was about $400 a month to go to school, which was nice because I got that on top of my drill pay, which kind of helped provide an additional crutch there. But I also got what they call MINC-STAT, so Michigan National Guard Tuition Assistance Program. So they offered me, I believe at the time it was $8,000 per semester for my school. Um, the school I went to, Aquinas College, actually provided me with a discounted tuition rate there. And then if you factor in all the other grants I had, I was able to finish up my degree at no cost, which is great. But in terms of just general connections, so there's about a million different organizations that are willing to help veterans in any way, shape, or form, whether it be a veteran that may have some sort of challenge or disability, or maybe just somebody who wants to network with other individuals. So there's everybody's willing to help veterans, which is awesome. So it was a huge pick me up for me as I was struggling to find my way into the civilian world before joining the military. I was actually kind of the two things back, if we're going back, that was in my head, right? I was going to get a full-time job or I was going to join the military by the end of that summer. And I did not get a full-time job by the end of that summer, essentially. So I enlisted in the military. So
Right.
afterwards, it was not hard to find a job at all. And there was a lot of people hiring me in field, wanted to hire me in careers that I had no business in, but just because I was a vet, they were willing to take a chance on me. So I think that was a huge, huge plus there.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And obviously the depth of some of your training and just the discipline and work ethic. I mean, there's so many soft skills that a military person has that would be very attractive to an employer. So it makes sense to me, let alone just it's a good thing to do. But when you were getting ready to get out, does the military have people that then you can talk through like career stuff with and make that transition? Tell me about that.
Yeah. So essentially, when you're about, I want to say 6 months to a year from your contract getting out, you go through like an out processing process where at first they try to get you to stay in. So they're going to give you all these wonderful benefits, throw some money at you, do whatever it takes to try to get you to stay in. But if you decide to take that step out, that's kind of where they'll have career counselors is what they would call them, and they'll help you, build your resume, make sure that all your finances are in place, make sure that, if you don't have a place to stay, you're properly equipped to transition into the civilian world.
Wonderful. It's wonderful as a citizen to hear that our military folks are getting that kind of support. That's one thing I learned at that educator summit about the Guard was just the amazing career development tools that the military has to help young people figure out what they want to be when they grow up and help them make that connection. And I'll share a resource at the end, everybody, to give you more information about that. So you made that transition out, and so you were recruited. Tell us where you landed and even how you got to the job now.
Yeah, so I actually was still in when I applied for West Michigan Works, my current employer. Um, and they were really, I guess workforce development. It was something that I had no idea what it was. I knew that they were out to support and help people, which transitioning from the military, it was something that I felt really passionate about as well. And that's just kind of what I went off of, was just my passion on being able to help and support the community as a whole. So they hired me in as a business solutions representative, where I'd essentially work with local businesses to provide them assistance with applying for grants, local recruitment assistance, along with a number of different items there. Where then I transitioned to a project coordinator, where I was able to kind of be the behind the scenes guy when it comes to grants and help with the administrative aspects there. And then that's where I landed into my existing role as the Construction Careers Council um, lead here, where I essentially just help the council meet its guidance there. So.
Yeah, that's great. I love that your career path has continued to evolve, and it probably keeps some interesting challenges in front of you. And it's not something you thought you'd be 10 years ago, but that your career continues to evolve.
Yeah, and it kind of all correlates with each other. I started off doing one thing, which led to another door opening, which follows to another door opening. So you really never know truly where you're going to end up, which is kind of where it goes back to just make sure you're doing something you enjoy, because all the other little stuff does not matter.
Yeah, I just love that you were able to share that, because I think a lot of young people think that they're going to pick a career and be in that for the rest of their lives, or they're so afraid to pick something that they'll be stuck with for the rest of their lives. So I love someone like you, Jason, who can help us understand it's a journey and you have choices and twists and turns. You can choose to get out of the military. Even if you choose to go in for certain reasons, that doesn't mean you're there forever, unless you choose to be. And obviously that's some people's stories, that they're in there forever. We have about 6 minutes left. I'd like to address a little bit about myths about military. And if you were to have a group of high school students, what you'd want them to know about choosing military as a career like you did.
So are there any like myths that you have on top of your head that you would want me to address that you've heard? Because I don't talk to that many.
Sure. Oh, I know, like as a parent, I think one of the things is like, oh, I don't want my child to go off and be killed in war, right? That's just this immediate gut reaction.
Yeah.
But what would you have to say to me as a mom if my son or daughter wanted to go in?
Yeah, I mean, so the reality of it is the United States isn't in a full scale conflict and has no plans to be in the foreseeable future. The chances of actually getting deployed and then getting to see conflict, it's very specific on who they let to go do those types of things. The majority of people who get to go overseas, they're going to spend a lot of the time on a base in a safe zone, where a few people will have to go out into a combat zone, which is very specific to those careers that would do those types of things, which would be like more the infantrymen, the cavalry scouts, things along those lines. But it really just comes back down to what you decided you wanted to do. But there are 100 different careers in the military that will never see combat.
Yeah, and I think that I love that you just shared that, because I think that's one of those myths that a lot of people just think infantry, right? But there's so hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and more thousands of job possibilities. And to take the opportunity to find out what those are and get the guidance from military of what would be a good fit. And obviously the ASVAB, just the test scores, helps bring you into what kind of jobs they'd even want you for. I know a couple of young people in my life, their test scores were so high that they got recruited into jobs that they would have never even thought for themselves. Like you said, the intelligence, you obviously scored pretty well. But that's some of the great career exploration that our military can offer young people through this process.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And when you do get into those higher level jobs, they do come with certificates and credentials, right? So when I graduated my basic training and advanced individual training, I actually had, I think it was like 32 college credits that I was able to transfer to my school. So I didn't have to take essentially a quarter of my degree. So even though I took a year off of the college, I still got all my credits that I needed that year.
That's great. I love to hear. I think that's what I want people to know is there's so many perks. I remember going to that educator summit and thinking, if my son hadn't got the full ride scholarship for football, I would have definitely encouraged him to consider the National Guard because I just heard so many amazing perks that I, as a civilian, had not known until I went through that. So it's just an encouragement to our school counselors, if you don't know a lot about these type of careers, to really educate yourself, to give good guidance to young people. So as we finish up, we have about 2.5 minutes left, Jason. I do want you to let's just see what the long term, the perks and benefits are very varied. I'm just reading a question in the chat. Long term, the perks and benefits are very varied and invaluable. They're thanking you for serving our nation. What about retirement and stuff? Like, are there reasons that people do choose to stay in long term? Is it kind of an amazing retirement opportunity?
Oh yeah, I mean the retirement in the military really is amazing. I mean, a lot of people can retire at the age of 40 if they really wanted to after serving that initial 20 years.
Yeah.
So the cool thing about being in the military, if you do go active duty full time, all your life expenses are paid for. So essentially, every dollar you earn is just fun money, is what we would like to call it, right? But you also have the opportunity to invest into a number of different, like they call them TSP accounts, which is essentially you'll put in a certain percentage of money, and then the Army will match that percentage, and then that goes to into like the stock market, and then it'll go up over time. But you also get a pension, and so if you stay in that full 20 years, I believe you'll get it's like it starts off, I think, 60% of your base pay from when you got out of the military for the rest of your life, starting at the age of 60. So if you're making $3,000-4,000 a month when you retire in the military, then essentially you'll be making 60% of that for the rest of your life when you hit the age of 60. But you also get to collect Social Security on top of that, as well as any of those additional savings. So ultimately, majority of people are really well off. Plus, they'll give you the health care for really cheap or free, I believe. And just can't beat it.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so many young people are burdened with student debt, and there's a lot of anxiety around that. And so young people, please consider this as an option. With our final, just 30 seconds, Jason, why don't you give a final word of encouragement or wisdom to young people who might be watching this and are considering military?
I just say get out and do it. If you're on the edge and you don't think you have what it takes to do it, I promise you do. It's not as hard as it seems. If you need help, you'll meet the best people in your life to support you and help you get through it. Like they say, no man left behind. So just go out there and enjoy it. It's a wonderful experience, and you won't regret it.
You've been a terrific role model for us today, Jason. I sure appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you for having me. All right.